So everybody, welcome to Reducing the Stress Response with Eva Clark. Eva is a medical hypnotherapist and a trainer. She directs Mind-Based Healing, a nonprofit that provides leadership in the development and application of mind-based practices to effectively treat the psychosocial factors behind chronic disease. So please welcome Eva Clark.
Hello. I'm glad to be here. And I think it's like you always decide on these topics months in advance, but then as it comes to the moment, you're like, I'm really glad I'm doing this topic right now. Because with the political and the racial and the viral world that we are in right now, having tools to lower the stress response is vital. Not only is it that it doesn't feel good, right, to have stress, but also stress has major effects on our physical health and in developing chronic disease. So this sometimes fatal response is why it is so important that we have tools to manage stress effectively. So I'm going to share a PowerPoint so that we can get through a lot of material. All right, so how does stress affect the body and our health? Because we want to first look at this. When we first get stressed, like right now, currently, my heart is racing. I have no saliva in my mouth. And fortunately, I had breakfast 4 hours ago, because when we first get the stress response, our digestion stops, or it slows down, or it goes really fast just to kind of get rid of everything that's in your stomach. And why is it doing this? Because your bodies are preparing you for action. So all the energy is being redirected to your extremities, right? To other parts of the body. At the same time, your heart's accelerating. Your body will actually retain salt and keep you from going to the, going pee, urinating, in order to raise the pressure in the blood. And this is also done so that oxygen can be delivered quickly to power muscles, right? We're getting into action. Another thing that happens in the body is that the liver releases glucose, releases sugars to produce more energy. Then the muscles are also contracting, right? I mean, they're getting tense, they're getting ready to leap, to run, to respond in whatever way. And in that first moment of stress, we actually don't feel pain or barely feel pain. This is the case, for example, when you see people in sports, right? Or football players, they don't feel the pain. Or yourself, if you've ever gone into an accident, right? At the beginning, I actually had an accident in November. And it wasn't until I got to the hospital to get stitches that I started going, oh, my finger hurts. But until that moment, I was in this stress response and nothing hurt, Also, what happens in that moment, which was really good for my finger when I cut it, was that your body raises the inflammatory markers. And it does that. It gets your immune system really active to make sure in that first moment when you're running away from the saber-toothed tiger, that cut you have on your foot because you ran over a sharp stone doesn't end up producing infection or doesn't bleed you out. So that's happening right at the beginning. At that time too, just like the energy is moved away from digestion, energy is also moved away, and the immune system is moved away from detecting and killing cancer cells. We always have these little cells that go a little crazy, and our immune system is constantly cleaning them up. But in the moment of a stress response, that's not a priority, right? That's long-term: repair, replace, and renew. Also, what happens in the body is the serum cholesterol and the free fatty acids are released into the blood as well. And at first, our focus really increases. I don't know if any of you guys have had like an accident or almost an accident in which in that moment, you're just like, I am not hitting that. And there's this clarity and everything just seems to slow down and your body just prepares. And this first response is really good in that first moment to take action. The problem is this stress response we have happens no matter if we're in a car, we have a saber-toothed tiger, or we're pursuing a bison, Or we're worried about when we get home and our spouse asks about this or that, right? Or a deadline. These same symbolic stressors also produce the same reactions in our bodies. And the problem with these is when you are thinking about in the car, when I get home, we have to talk about that. She's not happy or he's not whatever. We're not taking actions in that moment. We're actually just ruminating. But our bodies are preparing for action. So what happens is we build up what's called those stress products, that tension, that glucose in the body. And so then what happens is when we do this over and over every day, the minute the alarm clock goes off, we are in a hurry, and then the coffee, and we have to hurry up, and then the traffic, and we have to get our kids, and where's lunch, and I forgot, and there's this deadline, then I have this meeting, and maybe I'll get the project done after the meeting. When this is happening ongoing, the stress response becomes long-term. And what happens is that first stopping or quickening of the digestion becomes dysregulated. So you start having strange things happen in digestion. You get bloating all the time. Anytime you eat, you have stomach cramps in the morning or right before meetings, right? All these different digestive problems. What happens as well is your blood pressure goes up and it tends to stay at those levels. So your body is increasing that pressure and you're not taking it anywhere. Then remember, the liver was also releasing glucose. So then what happens is it gets dysregulated too, because the body's releasing and no one's needing that glucose at that moment, no part of the body. And then we have the muscles. Again, the muscles are ready for action, but if the action is just you thinking about, I've got that deadline at, on Friday, or myself like, okay, how can I get all this done in by 3 hours? Is 3 hours enough? Am I gonna, the muscles start tensing, and then you start getting all these strange aches and things. And what's interesting about stress is, though at first, with that first adrenaline shot, we don't feel pain. When we have stress and we get into that second, more of the cortisol and the glucocorticoids, the perception of pain actually increases. Then remember, at first, if we had an injury while we were running away from the bison, and we had those immune system really making sure that nothing was going to happen with that cut, after a while, the immune system no longer is doing that work properly. So it even takes longer to heal a wound. I had a client come in, she had broken her wrist in the middle of this project, and 3 months later, her doctor was telling her that the bones weren't healing properly. And so we investigated that, and it was because of all this stress. The body wasn't doing its work, right? And then also we have less resistance to infection. So I say probably the best thing for COVID is to relax, right? We want to be able to resist. You'll notice as well, when you're extremely stressed, that's when the cold happens to come in, right? You're like, really? I really don't need a cold right now. Other things that happen, which is interesting, is that at first in a stress, our inflammation goes up. Once that first stage happens, the cortisol will actually, when that kicks in, it will actually regulate the inflammation again to say, okay, we're all doing good now. Let's just get this going. But when it's long term, the body no longer reacts to that cortisol trigger, the natural body's cortisol trigger, and the inflammation just keeps going up, and affecting other parts of the body. Then if you remember our short term, cancer cells, when you're in a rush, you're in a hurry getting away from a saber-toothed tiger, the immune system is not going to be pursuing and killing off and, repairing, replacing cells. So that cancer cell begins to proliferate. And then as well, you've got the cholesterol and the free fatty acids accumulating in the blood, and the sympathetic nervous system also gets dysregulated. So what happens is, it's almost like when you have a lot of stress, then anything that happens, there you go, you react quite quickly, right? can't see the bottom of my thing, so I'm not sure if there's another one. Oh, there it is. And then lastly, our concentration that at first got very focused, it's just, it gets fatigued and we can no longer concentrate properly. Yet at the same time, we have these, persistent, what am I going to do? What if that keeps us from sleeping? So what happens to these, as you might have already started to notice with the long-term stress, you might have already got an inkling, oh, wait a minute, there's a disease that has that issue, or there's an illness that has that issue, right? These overstressors lead to chronic disease. So I wanted to kind of go back a moment and see with you guys, if you could share, we're going to look at some of those diseases, and I would love to hear what's going on in the body. What are the stressors for that disease? So the first one was irritable bowel syndrome. What's happening in the body stress-wise that might be creating that IBS? IBS is, all the digestive stuff. And you guys can just unmute.
Dysregulated digestion.
Yes. Yep. Our digestion has gotten so dysregulated, it's like when we eat, instead of digesting, it sits there, or when we eat, instead of digesting, we have to rush to the bathroom, right? Then, for example, chronic lower back pain. What is the stress markers for chronic lower back pain?
Chronic muscle tension, inflammation.
Yes. You've got the chronic muscle tension, you've got the inflammation, and in all of these, remember we have the dysregulated sympathetic nervous system.
Yeah.
So that means that the fight or flight is like trigger happy. It's happening very quickly with very little motivation, right? How about hypertension?
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, we got that high blood pressure.
Inflammation,
What? Yeah, inflammation. Yep. What else is happening with hypertension?
high blood pressure,
Yep.
serum cholesterol and free fatty acids accumulate in the
Yes.
blood,
Yep.
Chronic
And-
muscle tension.
and dysregulation of the sympathetic nervous system.
Exactly.
Every
And
week.
then heart disease. The leading after that.
High blood pressure.
Yeah, there's even more. They used to think, they've now realized that heart disease is actually also considered an autoimmune disorder. Why? Because the heart disease and the heart attacks happen once all this cholesterol and the fatty acids, the plaques are being formed, and then the plaques actually get inflamed.
Wow.
And that is actually what's causing a lot of the heart attacks. The plaque gets inflamed, or all the pressure will push the plaque, and the plaque will move into an area and get clotted. And again, the inflammation is making those plaques even bigger. How about arthritis?
That's also inflammation.
Yep. You got inflammation. And then think about this, the immune system. Remember, the immune system is not doing its job. It's too much into almost fight or flight. So it's not killing off cells that are already dead or not working properly. And it's not healing wounds. So in your joints, you are accumulating cells that should have been cleaned up.
It almost seems like a freeze response because, I mean, if you think about it, arthritis, they're having problems moving and doing. So their
Yeah.
body's suggesting, hey, don't really want to be doing this.
Yeah, there's a freeze response going on. There's a tension. The cells, the joints are not being cleaned up properly.
And increased perception of pain.
And there's an increased perception of pain. Perfect, exactly.
And at this point, it's not stress anymore, it's distress. Because a certain dose of stress, it is needed for us to function every day.
Oh, yes,
When
yes,
get
yes.
chronic, it is already distress, although we call it stress,
Yeah.
but technically it's distress. Yeah.
Yes, yep, we're talking about the distress. Yeah, and we'll actually kind of look at the difference between eustress and distress. But these are definitely the distress, right? There's more of a threat. you know, I don't have time, I'm going to be late, that deadline, the embarrassment, any kind of threat to
Mm.
self-esteem, all of those will trigger these.
Yes.
For example, cancer.
Mhm.
Yeah, you got inflammation, you have cancer cells are proliferating. There's a lot of
Mm.
studies on stress and prostate cancer and stress and breast cancer and the links.
Basically all cancers, even dementia too, like Alzheimer, and they are all related to stress. Yeah.
Exactly. What about anxiety?
For sure. Yeah. And depression, it is also because there is a point that the person learn hopelessness, you
Yes,
know,
learn hopeless, and
why and you know, yeah.
then you have decreased concentration, you have disturbances of sleep and mood, you can't sleep very well, and then again your dysregulated sympathetic nervous system is just getting triggered by everything. And so I'll have clients come in going, I don't know, this morning I was at work, I was just doing my job, and all of a sudden my body, my heart just started racing, right? Because now it's quite dysregulated, and anything, a thought that just passed by perhaps, got the whole stress response started.